Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of the Altmed podcast. With me as always, Mitch Kurtz in the co-host seat and
Hello.
live from the sunny Queensland nursery farm. I don't know what we're calling it, but we have the founder of Standard Botanic. It's Adam Benjamin. Adam, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Andrew and Mitch. Congratulations. Your series, the Altmed, wonderful series. Really good to hear about all the innovations and movement in the Australian cannabis industry.
No, thank you, Adam. We love doing it. We love meeting people through it, and great to actually finally have a chance to chat, because I did see just overnight the article that popped up in Cannabis about all the exciting stuff that you're doing, and I am keen to talk about all that and sort of unpack a bit of a discussion around genetics and cultivation. But before we launch into that, let's find out how you launched into the medical cannabis industry. What's your background, and how did you come to be standing on a farm in Queensland on a video call to us?
Well, look, your timing's impeccable. I mean, I guess the short answer to that is really luck, but really the longer answer is medical cannabis has emerged in Australia. We know this is a strong sort of patient-driven industry, but it happens to be in the sweet spot where good agriculture meets good healthcare in Australia, and we're good at those things. And so having, like many other people, I guess, in this industry who've gravitated to the medical cannabis cultivation or manufacturing space, there was a personal story. We had very close friends many years ago. He passed away. He was an 8-year-old Sunshine Coast boy, had terminal cancer, and medical cannabis, before it was legalized, although this was a law-abiding family, I heard of the benefits to Sam. And so I vowed that all the other Aussie Sams out there, once licensing came to play, they would be helped. But I guess if you look at all the cannabis industry in Australia to date, really, I would say that's a forward-facing industry. They are all geared up to hopefully to help the patient. It's the patient's well-being, it's the patient's health that counts the most. But over the last 5 years, having been a pioneer of one of the cultivating companies, the first fully licensed in Australia, I thought, well, who's helping the industry? So out of that, Standard Botanic was born to address what I would call the holy trinity. The yield on plants, so the yield, the quality and profile, if you like, and most importantly, the consistency, because I guess you've had enough people on your podcast. Anyone can grow cannabis. Growing cannabis well really takes the right combination of skills. So Standard Botanic was and is the first cannabis nursery dedicated to service those licensed cultivators, to give them good quality Aussie stock of plants.
No, that's great. So effectively, are we talking, I mean, are you sort of building a seed bank, or like what is, I guess, the scope of what you're doing at Standard Botanic?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. I know there are a lot of seed banks out there, and I guess plenty of the customers or cultivators in Australia will seek things from overseas. We're really looking to the economics. I love hearing that a lot of the cultivators and businesses are there to provide affordable access to cannabinoid medicine. I mean, that's a great aim. But I do believe that as a cultivator in Australia, you need to be very firmly and strongly focused on the economics of what you're doing there. Now, a lot of us, if you've been at the coalface, know the importance of the quality of the plants going into that. So looking at a return on your asset, in other words, the yield of your plants. We know the customer profiles out there in Australia. You guys know the stats. So particular profiles are very important. And I think most importantly, actually, from the feedback I'm getting from most of the cultivators, consistency. So really, we are here as a cloning business at scale. We'll be producing thousands of cuttings to fit into the programming of our cultivators. Some will need them on a weekly, bi-weekly program. Others will be every quarter. So the short answer to your question is we own our own elite genetics and we provide them in thousands in clone form, so that scalability can support our growers in their ways to grow the flower, the premium end of the market.
Right. So you essentially have a licensed facility that you grow clones for people for companies to start with genetic material. Is that the
That's
process?
right. They can grow ours under license.
Excellent. And then, so how, the obvious question is, how did you get the elite genetics? Give us the story.
Look, it's great. And I mean, you're right. It's always the story. So look, again, and you led from the top. How did I get into this? Really, there was a fair bit of luck. So, 20 years ago, traveling the world after school, found my way to Europe and Amsterdam. And I don't know if you've traveled overseas. If you have, typically when you hear an Aussie accent overseas, there's a sort of an immediate connection, not all the time. But in Amsterdam, I happened to connect with people at the time I didn't realize who I'd connected with. And one of them was Neville Showmakers. And I knew, I was reading quite an interesting book years later by Howard Marks, Mr. Nice. I'm not sure if you've read it. Amazing read. I didn't quite realize who I was meeting with, but it turns out Neville is one of the godfathers of these genetics, really. These, what I would call godfather strains. And so I guess on a handshake, not knowing where it would go. Some 20 years later, we fast forward, these genetics were privately held in obviously regulated, licensed jurisdiction overseas. And some year and a half ago, when I was licensed with Standard Botanic, I pulled the trigger, brought them in, and hopefully we can give those Aussie growers now access to these godfather strains. Right.
So are there any insights into the specific strains that you've got access to, or is that a little bit under lock and key?
Oh, look, of course there's proprietary information, but it is a good point you raise. I mean, we do hear about a lot of these exotic strains. I think the important thing that I'm seeing in terms of what people are trying to import from these seed banks for really it's a lottery with seeds. It's like having parents, mum and dad, same seeds, different children. And so we really wanted to fast track. We talk about sort of, yes, the if you call the elite profile, again, that holy trinity, the yield, the profile, and most importantly, particularly in the medical space, the consistency, the intergenerational consistency. That is important. And I know you guys have already indicated it's always tempting and good to talk about, certain profiles, but I do think there's also just a timeline. The importance of the timeline in Australia as we see international markets opening up. And really, we are great at growing plants in Australia. We know that over 52.5% of the world's opiates for medicine are grown in Australia. We do this well. So my view is if we are going to be able to achieve this in the cannabinoid medicine space, time is of the essence. So whilst, yes, we are proud of the elite genetics we've got, really getting access for the Aussie grower so that instead of having to endure that development cycle, import seeds from wherever, take a lottery, go through your first grow, work out which strains you want, rinse, repeat, test your plants, then go for intergenerational. But you can see these things take 12 to 24 months. And so we really want to say to a grower, a licensed grower, hey, look, you've got everything up and running, you've got your license, you actually need access to plants proven up with data that will get you into a commercial harvest within 3 months of taking stock of our material.
Yeah, no, it's a great initiative because it is a missing piece. We've heard about obviously Australia has, as it should, very strict controls around, the quarantine and, making sure that phytosanitary certificates are supplied for any imported plant material. But of course, these things then do take time. And so the thought that a licensed producer in Australia could actually, look inward domestically for supply of genetic starting material is a huge boost. I know there was some genetics research. I think it was happening through Agriculture Victoria out at Latrobe. It might still be, but I don't know whether or not any of that was really just for research purposes, whether that was being opened up. So I think having a commercial venture in Australia where people know they can actually just, contact someone to get that is a great leap forward for the industry.
Well, thank you. I mean, obviously, I agree. And look, there will be research and whatnot in the background. But I think, again, time is of the essence. Again, whilst it's really altruistic and lovely to be in the business for a grower or a manufacturer to provide affordable access, which ultimately they will be doing. It's critical that they're looking at the economics. The cultivators looking at being profitable. You've got to be profitable so that you've got longevity in this business. And that's really where we come into it to say, look, at a commercial standpoint, these are the profiles that you need if you want to choose them and you want to go down an array of these things. That's for you. If you've singled out a certain part of the market, obviously you're welcome under license to use our genetics. But you're quite right. There is huge opportunity, and yes, there is some good research being done. I've seen it at the coalface. My own experience, we're very fortunate, 2017, one of the first cabs off the rank as a license holder. And I've seen this many times. It's interesting, Mitch, you sort of talk about the story, and often it is the story because there's a lot of experts. Everyone seems to be an expert in this space, but actually the story here is, I've contacted a lot of the top guys. You've interviewed all these guys in terms of the cultivation businesses. I've said to them, what's your wish list? If you could have an ultimate wish list of the plants you were growing, tell me what's the important parts. And they always talk about the potency, the strength, and the profile of the plants, whether it's the cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids. We know about these things. They then go on about yield, of course, highest yield, maximum yield per square meter. We know they're driving to the economics, but they very quickly also include consistency. So again, it's that what I would call the holy trinity. You've got the profile, you've got the yield, and you've got the consistency. So we all know this, but then when I talk to them about, well, where are you at? And actually what's your number one in reality? They all talk about consistency. If only they had consistent premium flowers every single harvest. And so we know in Australia, as to your point, Andrew, yes, we have some very strong and firm biosecurity laws into Australia. I think that's a double-edged sword. It's wonderful because yes, only the best stuff gets into Australia, although it's very difficult. But as an export country, it's wonderful. We are one of the trusted sources for good agriculture and good medicine. But on the TGA and the therapeutic side of things, we know that the tolerances for variation in Australia and absolutely overseas are very tight. So our proposition to a cultivator is, of course you need good yield, of course you need the right profiles, but gee whiz, you need very consistent quality plants coming through so you can bank on your premium flower.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the stabilized genetics piece is just something that will come, I think, more for Australian growers. But, we're such a nascent industry that you are going to get considerable variability. It's definitely a point that other agronomists and cultivators that we've had on the podcast have described. And so that's obviously a huge piece. I think as well, even when you have that holy trinity of yield, profile, and stability, the other thing that I think is missing is that we seem to have a lot of companies in Australia using manufacturing methods and techniques, which I'm sure, fit within GMP, but, don't necessarily preserve volatile plant compounds. And so, the kind of the richness of a given strain can, to some extent, be removed if the plant isn't sort of manufactured with greater care. So that's just a
good point. No, yeah. I totally agree. And I know, you speak to enough people who know what they're talking about in terms of the entourage effect and the whole plant medicine. I think that's the beauty. Really, we know that as a multiple of, say extract or any of the other forms of administration in terms of medical cannabis prescriptions, we know premium flower commands a multiple. We know it commands a multiple of 10 plus over any other agricultural crop. It is the number one profitable crop by a factor of a lot. So, and the beauty, to your point, is you can't play with the flower by the time it gets to the laboratory in terms of its profile. You had to get it right when it was growing. You had to have the right genetics. Exactly. So I completely agree with you there. I also like that, I don't have a view particularly on big pharma and all of this sort of business, but I do think that's why cannabis has been successful. It's the sort of the little engine that could. I mean, aside from it's just got this wonderful application across different strains and different formats. you can't, big pharma, no science lab can compete with a flower at this stage. So I think that's where I'm really appealing to the Aussie growers and the cultivators who are now licensed. We know there's almost 100 of them, but you've got to think, well, why at 6 years into this industry, why are less than sort of 15 cultivators actually growing? And why is 95% of all the flower and other products in Australia imported? Well, my view is, part of the, as you say, the missing piece is access to good quality genetics. So really, we're sort of here saying, look, great, you want to be involved. I assume a lot of your listeners, that's why they're listening, that they're interested and they've done their research. But I say, as a cultivator, if that's where you want to specialize, then that's what you should be very good at. Don't try and do all of the things. I think, to your point, yes, it's a nascent industry, but 6 years in, we're starting to see people sort of move so that they sort of think, well, look, the vertical integration model, sure, a few people have pulled it off, but actually, I'm a good farmer. And when we do see the cavalry's arrived, big farmers have decided to carve off a little bit of their farm, whether it's an avocado or a tomato farm, and they want to move into this space. And if you talk to normal traditional farmers, 99% of the time, they do not run their own nurseries and their own, propagation units. They just call up, they say, hey, look, I've got 150,000 tomatoes to plant this weekend. I need the root stock. So we're really trying to proposition Standard Botanic in what I would call mainstream agriculture, as cannabis fast becomes the ninth major agricultural crop in the world, and certainly the most profitable, particularly when you look at premium flower.
So did you import seeds, or did you import mother plants originally?
Now, initially, quite some time ago, it had to come in through seeds. But it is a good question. So aside from, growing seeds and going through all the trials and tribulations that any cultivator would go through, the track record of importation, I don't know if you're aware, but of any company in Australia that's tried to import live cannabis plants in Australia, and there's really not very many, half of them have died in quarantine. So, we're trying to say to the growers out there, look, there's probably only so much risk you can take before you probably should look to some assistance, whether it's just on the supply chain of things. We know there's obviously a lot of smart guys, a lot of smart growers, a lot of smart facilities. But we started there, and many generations later, we've shored it up. And I think it's a good point you may be making. I'm not sure if it's my segue or it's yours, but it's wonderful to think about the elite nature of genetics. And again, going to that holy trinity, high yield, the right profiles, and clearly consistency is very, very important. But I think the other important aspect to this is really the data that you wrap around particular genetics. We all know that specific genetics respond differently to their inputs, whether it's light, nutrients, water, all the environmental conditions. So for us, it's very important to say to our customers, hey, look, this is for us to help you with the data we've collected. We will give you we've developed to date, I haven't seen too many of these. So we've developed what we call the Standard Grow platform. Really, it's a data platform that allows all our customers to share, if you like, the optimal way to grow our specific genetics, which I think, and I hope, is very helpful to our customers. But actually, if you imagine we have, and we will have many customers down the track, every customer is in a unique environment. Nobody's in the same greenhouse or in the same latitude, and certainly around Australia. And I know you've interviewed plenty of people that talk about the differences of how plants respond. So really, our data platform allows, if you like, multiple experiments to go on. So as a customer, you can elect to join our data platform. You're welcome to use our data, but should you need to benefit from other data we've collected, de-identified, from other customers or other environmental conditions. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you're already growing one of our strains really well. You've got it in a greenhouse. You're situated in Victoria. You've decided you want to move into maybe using CO2, and you hear it's, worth using. Now, we may well have another customer who's already gone down that route with CO2 on the same genetics as you're using. So that Standard Grow program, you can look at the cost benefit. And you can say, gee, the yield on this or the increased these are things we want to be able to offer our cultivators to make informed decisions without having the risk and certainly the money outlay before they jump into it. So I'm quite excited about that side of it.
I really like that. Sorry, can I just say, I think the obvious hurdle potentially there is just whether, in the spirit of competition, companies will be sharing that. But I hope they do, because I think it would provide almost like a blueprint for the entire country to see, what grows well here, which, under these particular conditions, this was the result or the outcome. So it almost be a bit like no, goodness, it feels strange saying this as an atheist, but a bit of a Bible to growing in Australia. So I hope there is actually uptake with that. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. Look, you're quite right. Every customer will have its own needs and perhaps, needs for privacy. But I kind of think of it, and I won't be, I'm not an Apple or an Android or whatever sort of guy. I happen to be used, Apples. And if you ever see with Apple Analytics, you don't have to share your data. Don't want to share it, you don't have to. As a customer, you don't want to share it, you don't have to. You're welcome to use our data. But should you be sharing, you can benefit from the improvements from everyone. So I do, as you say, hopeful, but it is totally up to the customer's prerogative.
It does beg the question, though. You imagine some companies would want to grow proprietary strains or choose phenos that were individual to their company, because going on the data of somebody else's crop would mean that you're producing the same crop, limiting the amount of difference. I imagine if you were trying to create something new. So how do you combat that scenario? If somebody comes to you and says, I want a unique strain, how many strains do you offer, and how do you do crossbreeds? I'm so interested in the breadth of the service you offer.
Yeah, look, the profiles are the obvious ones. Obviously, the high THC and the high CBD, low THC, and then obviously the one-to-one. So we have what we think will meet the market, and we have a fair range of them. But it is a good point you raise, because I can only suggest that, I guess, the way we deliver to our customers, aside from the benefits of fast-tracking their commercial cultivation by considerable timelines,
sure,
is we don't dictate to them. We don't say, hey, you've got to brand yours Standard Botanic, XYZ or whatever the recreational names that everybody wraps around, Bruce Banner, Pineapple Express. You don't have to do this. If you are big on developing your own brand and your own marketplace in the flower space, go for it. That's totally up to you. If you are big on using our plants because you happen to believe that the yields are so good that it'll work for extraction, we have very high CBD outdoor crops. Should there be companies, we know there are in Tasmania and so on, who are working in the broadacre space. So you're right, and we do have to consider each customer's needs. But I don't see, I would think that if customers or growers were that caught up in protecting a particular genetics, which we know they are in terms of any big company in the world who's been able to sufficiently develop their own genetics, they never share it. This is why I'm basically turning the market on its head. I'm saying, no, Standard Botanic will be sharing across the board with licensed cultivators. So we know that there isn't a lot of sharing amongst those who develop their own genetics in-house. But if you think about, again, the seed banks out there, plenty of the US brands and names and breeders, not that they can get it out of the US, but if you're going to bring it in from Canada or Holland or maybe Spain, everybody jumps on the same, White Widow. Everybody's got White Widow. And when they bring in the lottery of White Widow and they think, hang on, it's not reading the same profile as what he told me. And it's interesting, again, to your point of the stories. I talk to these seed banks over there. It's quite funny. They much prefer, particularly the ones in Holland, they much prefer the underground recreational grey market, whatever you want to call it, to the corporate guys. And I'll tell you why. Not because, of the regulatory burdens, although that is very high for them, but because they're not producing consistent. They're seeds. It's not their fault. So I'm not so sure. I mean, again, yes, you may be right. We're going to have to consider, case by case. But if you're a company here that's using our genetics and you brand it, Mitch's, marvelous, that's up to you. Whereas if you just want to enter into a wholesale agreement, and that's part of what Standard Botanic wants to help customers with. We've got a number of offtake agreements that, again, if you want to choose it, because that's all you want to do, be a grower, then we can facilitate that pipeline as well. So I'm not saying we do it all for everyone, but really my premise is we just want to focus on being a really good supplier so that you can focus on being a really good grower and beyond, if that's what you really want to do. So we're really trying to focus on that core strength, providing good genetics.
Fantastic. And so I'm just curious how, because I'm obviously very deep in the genetics kind of timelines and conversation. I'm curious, the part where you said you imported seeds from that were being held for Neville. Obviously, Neville's been in Australia since about 2003, until he passed in 2019. So they didn't come from Neville. They came from somebody who was holding his seeds in Holland. Is that the case?
That's right. He was holding them for me, but obviously he was back in Australia. But as you know, he's got family. He's certainly got a lot of friends as the godfather of genetics back over in Holland, and plenty of other jurisdictions. I mean, you probably know more than me in terms of, things were going out into the US, things were going all over the world. But my view was, look, there's going to be a lot of compliance and regulatory, hurdles to jump through. This must be held over there in the right jurisdiction until it can come into Australia. But I guess, fortunately, remember, they've been growing it over there and in other jurisdictions, they kind of know what they've been doing there. So I guess we were able to fast track. And yes, you're right. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2019, but he's still got family. Got family. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were growing it here originally, back before the Dutch years, in the 80s, early 80s, and that. So
well, that's right. And he actually, I know, you probably know more of his history than I do, but he's very much had a Queensland. There's been Queensland. We know about the Western Australia side of things. So I guess, look, again, and whilst I wish I knew more, really, I'm not a plant guy. I've had to learn as quick as I can because I see the business merits of being a supplier to the Aussie growers. But aside from the business merits, and this would be nothing new to you or your audience, it's all about the data. It's all about being able to back up, everybody. If you imagine, everybody would be saying, yeah, well, my genetics are wonderful. It's about the proof is in the pudding. You've got to have the data. And I do believe that Standard Grow platform is an integral part of assisting these cultivators. Because as you know, and there's some very public sort of displays of, one crop, two crop failures. I won't name names. I mean, a lot of good companies come out of Victoria, but 80 something cycles later, why are you still in research and development? So good on them, because I agree with you long term, but short term, when you're a company that's now licensed and you're burning $100,000-$300,000 a month, and you're staring down the barrel of 12 to 24 months of, a development phase of importing this lottery of seeds and, again, going through these cycles, I figure our proposition is here, look, have access. And again, within 3 months of our delivery to you, you will be in commercial harvest, and we'll show you with data to back it up how to do this optimally. If you want to improve on that, love you to.
No, that's great. I definitely, it really is the missing piece. In terms of the, I guess, the site where you are, can you tell us a little bit? I know there's rules around not identifying a particular place, but the actual, the setup that you have, have you got a few greenhouses, and what's it like up there?
Yeah, look, whilst it's, we're very fortunate, as you can see in the background, it's a beautiful day. For us, what's mostly important is of course, the data, but the sanitized, sanitary conditions. So we do it indoors. Just being fortunate that where we do it provides that. Very important that, intergenerational sanitized plants. Other aspects to the business, whilst, we believe delivering these plants in scale. So we will be scaling up in the next few months to make sure that probably Q3, Q4 this month, this year, as customers demand. Thousands of cuttings will be able to meet that demand, but we're very interested in, hearing from potential customers now so we can fit in with their timelines. So yeah, fortunately, as a facility, we've been able to get up and running. I learned a lot over the last 5 years. But the next phase of the business, which we're very excited about, maybe another podcast, who knows, is the tissue culture space. Because again, my view is this is just going to be mainstream ag, and most mainstream ag at scale looks to tissue culture. So we're very fortunate. We've got one of the lead people out of the US, wonderful person. Again, I'd have to say it's mostly luck, but hopefully, a lot of what we haven't seen in Australia in terms of disease and virus and things that you can see running through the US, running through Canada, give us as a country an advantage. We're not busy having to solve viruses that are here yet. So our view is we need to move this into a micro propagation facility, so that we can step it out at scale and certainly sanitized. And again, you would have plenty of people you've interviewed in terms of genetic drift and all their views, but this is something we're really moving fast on as well.
No, I think it's
very pioneering.
It's a great turnkey option for a lot of people that are just kind of stumped on what to do. They've got their site, they've got their investment, they've got their personnel, and they're like, how do we click go? So that it does make sense for a lot of people. I've actually spoken to a couple of people about you before as well.
Please,
yeah, fantastic. But so there's no kind of looming plans to do your own strains commercially, anything like that?
Look, it's an important point to make, not one I dwell on, but we certainly never intend to compete with our customers. Our customers are the licensed cultivators. So we're not here busy growing flowers. That's not what we do. We provide, I know there's some examples overseas where people, or even locally, where people, unfortunately, they have to start competing with their customers. I don't think that's the business model. We're a nursery. Of course, we know that there are, breeding opportunities, and we will be looking at those in time. But again, if you go back to the Holy Trinity, and certainly to the immediate needs of growers, licensed growers, it's, profile, yield, consistency. So that's what we're delivering. But of course, we welcome, people like you and the smart geneticists, and of course, technologies like molecular breeding. I think there is a lot of blue sky out there, but I guess, as you know, time is right now to be moving, certainly as the industry shifts a gear. I mean, again, it's wonderful to see that patients, and you guys are going to be up here for the upcoming symposium, but we're just geared at how do we help the industry, because we think Australia and the growers here deserve better. And to your point, we're just a private entity. We're able to do it. So yeah.
No, it's great. And you are a partner for the upcoming United in Compassion symposium. So, great to see Standard Botanic, partnering with such an important event in everyone's calendar. But yeah, so I assume, have you got any time carved out to sort of share with the industry, tales of your latest venture? Or will you get an opportunity to do that at the symposium?
Yeah, look, I'm excited too. Looking forward to meeting you both in person, obviously. But I do, there's a spot there. I think I'm up with a few of the other names where really just to look at the opportunities. I think, what we discussed a bit earlier is, if you're going to be good at something, be good at what you're good at, in terms of, if you're going to be a grower and you're already a good farmer, or you want to move into that space, I think focus on that core strength. Don't then try and be a manufacturer, or yes, if you want to partly wrap a brand around it. But I think that's where, if you're going to be a good cultivator and that's what you want to focus on, then that's where Standard Botanic can help you. So I guess possibly, what I'm trying to suggest to people, it's only a suggestion, because, I'm just playing my little part in this industry, is just start to focus on your core strengths. Like, it's a bit of a no-brainer, but don't be a, jack of all trades, master of none. Be really good at your core strength. And I just happen to believe we are very good at that in Australia. We are good at growing things. So hopefully we'll welcome you up with a bit of sunshine. It's only a few days away. And, you know, again, look, Lucy Haslam and her family, who again have been one of the driving strengths, because it is the patient well-being. Unfortunately for them, they had a personal side to this, but it is that ultimately we're here to help the patients. But if we can help the farmers to help the patients, I think we'll be an even better step.
I totally agree with that philosophy. You know, take care of the plants, that tends to take care of the patients. So yeah, that's good stuff, Adam. Thank you. We're very excited to meet you, and it has looked like Queensland has, you know, just looking behind you, I was expecting to see, you know, flooded rivers and, you know, maybe a few waterfalls and some things, but it's a bit drier than I was expecting. So that's good news for all the attendees. We'll still bring my Victorian, you know, weather,
gumboots,
gumboots and poncho, and you sort of dress for all seasons down here in Melbourne. But no, thanks.
Good thinking either way.
Yeah. No, thanks so much for your time, Adam. We'll look forward to catching up in person, and good luck with everything at Standard Botanic. I'm sure we'll speak again on the potty soon.
Yeah, real pleasure. Thank you both. All the best.
No worries.
Thanks, Adam.
Cheers. Bye.